as you probably could tell from this image, I have decided to create a second part to my Sky Princess and the Gryphon Prince series. Right, and as before, while I did talk about the main premise of the story as well as bits of the setting and its inspirations, I've decided to use this video as a way to talk about the characters and what roles they will play throughout the series, or at least throughout this particular story. Now, the main protagonists of this particular story, or rather, the main heroes that will play a role in the story and defeat the villain or the main antagonist, is a group of small, well, not small, but rather young people who are from various different parts of the place or the main setting known as Avesta, though the main protagonists, or at least the main characters that are focused on throughout the story, are Princess Soraya and her brother Prince Tahir, who are the main heirs to the throne of Bahar. Though in Tahir's case, he was the original heir before he unfortunately got cursed and was forced to leave Bahar because of it. And the main supporting characters who will definitely play a role in helping them defeat the main villain is Yasika, who is a young woman who is training to be part of a group known as the Sky Monks, and as a result, she serves as a major supporting character and the first person outside of Soraya and Tahir to join them on their quest. Right, and second will be Nasir, who is a hunter that ends up also joining them when he finds out who the characters are trying to defeat. Though they sort of get off on the wrong foot due to an incident where Nasir accidentally injured Tahir the first time he met him due to mistaking him for a regular Gryphon, though this will be elaborated more in the story once I write it. And the last two members of their group, though they're more unofficial than anything else, but they're still valuable nonetheless, are Marosh and Anzor, the main, well, I don't want to say pets, but they're more like traveling companions, but in their case, they're animal traveling companions, or more specifically, dogs that serve as the pets to Nasir and Soraya by extension. Though in the case of Marosh, who is a female Saluki, first meets the characters after Nasir accidentally injures Tahir. She is the main hunting dog of Nasir, as he and Marosh were raised by hunters who had to sort of kill animals and beasts in order to survive. Though this does come into conflict with Tahir, who himself is a Gryphon, especially since he actually lived with some Gryphons who he considers to be dear friends of him, and the fact that Nasir and his family did kill some Gryphons as a way to sell their parts or eat them doesn't really appeal him to Nasir. So of course this will play a bit of, say, conflict throughout the story. Right, and as for Anzor, he himself is the main pet of Soraya and Tahir, though he's mainly Soraya's pet dog, and he's very close with her because of it. And as you can see, he and Marosh are only two dogs of the group, so of course they sort of, you could say, they have a bit of a romantic relationship that occurs behind the scene because of it. As for the main villain of the story is Dahak. If you couldn't tell, yes, he is based on Jafar from Aladdin because, well, I mean, like Jafar, Dahak in the story served as, you could say, the classic evil advisor to the royal family of Bahar before eventually trying to start a coup against them, though technically his first attempt failed because of Tahir. However, he was able to get the last laugh by cursing Tahir into becoming a Gryphon, hence why Tahir is currently known as the Gryphon Prince. So of course, like Dahak, he eventually escapes, but not before returning several years later to get revenge on the family by turning them into stone, with Soraya and Tahir being the sole survivors, and by extension Anzor, their pet dog from earlier. For the secondary but still important other antagonists or villains that will appear, there are the Deeves, who are basically the equivalent to evil spirits or demons that unfortunately plague Avesta, and though they mostly serve under Dahak, the Serpent Shah as he calls himself, because he wishes to become king, and Shah is technically the Persian term for king, given how this story has a lot of Persian and cultural motifs. And that goes the same for the Deves, as the Deves are actually Persian monsters or evil spirits that appear famously in the Shahnameh, which was the main inspiration for my story. As like in the Shahnameh, the Deves serve under Dahak and mainly do his bidding, though they also serve under Anhria Mainu, who is basically, you could say, the greater scope villain or the true big bad behind Dahak, as Dahak is merely his, you could say, his second in command or his vessel, as the Hawk ended up making a deal with Anhria Mainu in order to gain a lot of power through, you could say, dark magic. And while he was already pretty ambitious and evil in his own right, but he just grew worse after he accepted Anhria Mainu's terms. And though Anhria Mainu doesn't really think highly of Dahak, as he has no problem disposing of him should he fail, but at the same time, he needs to use Dahak as a way to gain power over Avesta and defeat his enemy Omurazda, who is basically the big good of the story. And in case you notice, Andrea Manu is actually a combination of how he's called Ahriman or Angra Mainyu. And yes, for those of you Fate Stay Night fans, or Angra Mainyu is actually the original, you could say, big bad of the Shahnameh story. As for Soraya, I'd imagine her as resembling Rin from Fate Stay Night. And yes, there's another Fate Stay Night story, along with elements of Mayumi from the Irregular at Magic High School story. Though, in this case, like Soraya, while she is definitely fiery and perky like Rin, though she's not nearly as, you could say, nasty, nor is her temper that bad compared to hers. And she's actually a lot calmer and can act very dignified. I mean, given that she was raised as a princess after all. However, she's also very open-minded and caring, and as a result, she actually has a bit of a hard time fighting against people because of it. However, when her kingdom, along with her parents' lives, are on the line, she finds that she has to take up arms and defeat the evil Dahak, even if it means killing him in order to save her family and loved ones, and especially to avenge her brother, who she found out was cursed or at least targeted by Dahak and was forced to run away because of it. So of course she takes Dahak's attacks on her very personally, but at the same time she still maintains her sense of, you could say, innocence, or at least her cheerful personality, which actually attracts a lot of people to her, especially Nasir, who, yes, like if you didn't know, he ends up being something of a love interest. That'll be elaborated more on later. As for Tahir, he is, well, you could say he is definitely the big brother to Soraya, though he is by no means no big brother Billy. Rather, he's a very protective and caring brother to her, even after he was forced to leave her because of the curse. But at the same time, he made sure to watch over her even from a distance. And as for his human form, I'd imagine it's resembling Train Hartnett from Black Cat, along with Orphan or Cree Lancelot from the anime Sorcerer Stabber Orphan, as I'd imagine both he and Soraya having brown hair and maybe brownish golden eyes to symbolize that they are indeed of royal status. And as for his Gryphon form, well, I imagine him as looking like the classic Gryphon with the eagle face along with the lion's body and the wings to go with it. However, there will be some unique traits for him, such as the ability to have retractable teeth whenever he goes eating or hunting food. However, he is capable of using his claws along with his wings as weapons, and though he doesn't like to be seen as a griffin, at least not all the time, as he still considers himself human, but it's just that he was trapped in the form of griffin for so long that he ends up being afraid of losing his humanity as a whole and just reverting to nothing more than a savage beast, you could say, which is ironic considering how he did encounter other griffins who were, well, they were born griffins, but at the same time, they were not nearly as savage or dangerous like he was led to believe, and as a result, he learned a lot from them because of it, and considers them his honorary family, that along with the Sky Monks as well as his birth family. But even then, his relationship with his birth parents are a bit strained because he hasn't met them in years and fears as though he's lost their respect and or you could say their love for him because of his failure to defeat Dahak the first time, which is why he's very determined to defeat Dahak at all costs. Jessica is the third member of their, you could say, their traveling party, and she is, well, most of the time she's a non-combatant, but at the same time, she's also a very powerful healer due to her training as a sky monk, who are basically a group of monks that are, you could say, very similar to the Buddhist monks in real life, or even you could say the air nomads from Avatar, which definitely served as a major inspiration for my story. Though in this case, Yasuka is still, you could say, a monk in training, as she wishes to become a full fledged monk, as she was born and raised within the community. However, at the same time, she's still inexperienced when it comes to learning certain spells, or you could say magic, or being able to harness mystical energy in order to heal people. But at the same time, she also has the ability to, you could say, airbend, like you could say Aang from Avatar. Though in her case, she mostly uses for defensive purposes or to help Tahir, who she actually has a huge crush on because of how, despite his somewhat stern behavior, he's actually a lot nicer than he looks, which is why she fell for him. Unfortunately, she ends up suffering some serious angst because of it. Well, not because the relationship is forbidden, but it's because yes, it is forbidden in a way, as she, as a sky monk, cannot be with anyone, at least romantically or even sexually for that matter, because monks are supposed to be chaste and follow a line of chastity as a result, which makes it difficult for Yasuka, especially since she only have her eyes for Tahir, but unfortunately they cannot be together because she has to abstain from pursuing any romantic relationships out of fear of being seen as impure or too worldly. The fact that he's a prince also would probably make it more difficult for them, though that doesn't stop Soraya from wanting Yasuka to be with her brother. But either way, Yasuka does grow for being a simple love interest, as she does play a major role later in the story, especially given that she is the main supporter, or at least the main healer of the group. As for Nasir, who I mentioned earlier, he is basically the hunter of the group, and if you couldn't tell, he is based on Son Hak from Yona of the Dawn, right? Which actually, in a way, also serves as a minor inspiration, though that's very much downplayed. But he also has elements of Ren from Rising of the Shield Heroes. I'd imagine as having black hair and you could say more Asian features, given that he is stated to come from a vaguely sort of Asian part of Bahar, which itself is sort of based on Persia, or at least the parts of the Middle East, but it will have elements of South or even East Asian elements. But that will be elaborated more on later. In a way, he's actually kind of similar to Tahir, where he's very no nonsense and serious, though he also plays jokes from time to time, and you could say he's a bit of a comic relief character, though it's very much downplayed, as he's still very serious, especially since he actually has a grudge against Dahak because he destroyed the original home of Nasir and his family, thus forcing them to survive in the wild, which, well, he doesn't hate being in the wild, but he does hate how his home, along with the homes of everyone he cared about, was destroyed by the mad, power-hungry sorcerer, and as a result, he becomes very eager to join the group, though Tahir is understandably distrustful of him because the first time they met, Nasir ended up accidentally attacking Tahir, which caused Tahir to get injured, and the fact that Yasuka also accidentally got injured as a result, she was unable to heal him, and thus the group was forced to stay with Nasir's family, with Nasir's family apologizing and treating their wounds while also providing them food and shelter for the next few days. Though that doesn't stop Tahir from bringing it up and holding something of a grudge against Nasir. And the fact that Nasir becomes attracted to Soraya doesn't really endear him to his eyes, though they do eventually get along. But either way, Nasir is, you could say, he has bits of street smarts, as he's very savvy when it comes to hunting and surviving, or at least foraging in the wild. Not to mention, he's also good at business strategy because he and his family had to sell some of the food that they caught to the local bazaars near their home, though they technically live in the forest areas. But either way, he has a lot of skills that would definitely play a role, especially for Asuka, Tahir, and Soraya. As for Madosh and Anzar, like I mentioned before, they are both dogs. So they're based on a real life dog species that are native to Persia, or Iran as it's called, known as the Saluki. And though I'd imagine it was being based on Cross from the famous dog based anime slash manga series Ginga Nagaraboshi Gin. Given that Cross is a Saluki, though she doesn't really look much like one. But either way, I'd imagine Madosh and Anzor being loosely inspired by her, though while Madosh is female, like whereas Anzor is male, and to sort of to put a differentiation between them, I'd imagine Madosh is having light, or you could say a cream color slash white fur color, whereas Anzor has more of a blackish brown kind of sheen to his fur. But either way, they've shown themselves to be very loyal and very courageous, with Madosh having more fighting experience because, well, she's a hunting dog, whereas Antor was, well, he does go hunting at that time, but he's also slightly more pampered, which makes it a tad bit difficult for him to survive. But that doesn't stop him from being able to escape and live on his own after his owners get turned to stone and Soraya and Tahir are forced to run away, though he does eventually reunite with them around the middle part of the story, as he got separated from them but was able to escape being turned to stone like every other person or animal was. And though it takes him a long time to find Sarai, but eventually he reunites with her after months of traveling or surviving on his own. And finally, I wish to talk about the Sky Monks, where if you didn't guess already, or at least I mentioned it before, where they're actually based on the air nomads from the Avatar The Last Airbender series, given how Avatar was actually a major inspiration for my story. And though the Sky Monks, they are very pacifistic and do not like warfare or conflict of any kind. And it's similar to the air nomads. They like to live among the mountains, though partially because they enjoy the fresh air that comes from them, along with the cool yet manageable temperatures, but also because they wish to abstain from any materialistic or selfish desires that unfortunately get exhibited throughout the land of Vesta. And as a result, they've tried to be, say, set apart from the people, but not to the point of being self-righteous, as they're said to be very humble, but also have, you could say, a fun-loving side to them, as they try to stay optimistic and hopeful even during the darkest times. Not to the point where they come off as preachy or annoying, but while they understand that sometimes killing is necessary, but they don't like to do it, nor do they condone anything like, say, murder, or especially of the cold-blooded kind. So, of course, they have a sense of honor and do not want to start conflict, though they will partake in certain battles if necessary, such as when the rise of the threat that Dahak brings, and by extension Anhria Mainu's threat, arises. So of course they end up having to, well, not exactly break their rule, but they end up having to temporarily forsake their vow of pacifism and partake in the final battle, especially since Yasuka, who was one of their members, though she's an apprentice in this case, they are also very much willing to, you could say, throw down with anyone who tries to harm one of their own. And the three main Sky Monks that serve as Yasuka's main mentors, as well as her parental figures, are based on three noticeable not Sky Monks, but air nomads from the Avatar series, or at least the Avatar The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra series, such as Monk Gyatso, who was the mentor of Aang, at least before he tragically passed away, along with Yang Chen and Aang himself, or rather the adult Aang who appears in Legend of Korra, as I figured it would be interesting to have more references to the Avatar The Last Airbender by having these three characters be represented, where they serve as the main mentor figures, along with being supporting characters, albeit heroic supporting characters who definitely are also very much willing to help the group defeat the Hawk once and for all. And so for my next and last video, I wish to talk about more of the, you could say, cultural aspects. But in this case, I plan on featuring certain mythical figures in my story as a way to, you could say, spice up the story, or at least make it more interesting, especially for those of you who are interested in culture or world mythologies, right? And as you can see from these three images, there will be a lot of, you could say, a bit of a mishmash of different cultures, mainly from Middle Eastern or Asian, or specifically of South Asian elements, with such as Persian as well as Babylonian and even Hinduism, though that will be elaborating more in my next video. So as a result, have a good day, or you could say have a great day, and stay tuned